seconds to go. We need a Minneapolis miracle. Case on a deep drop, steps up in the pocket. He'll fire to the right side. Off by Diggs. Stay up. Oh my God! 30, 10, touchdown! Are you kidding me? Miracle finish! It's a Minneapolis miracle! Oh my God! No way! Ah! What a miracle finish!
And welcome back to the State of Purple podcast, the interactive recording for the State of Purple podcast. Thank you for joining us on this live chat. If you are in the chat, one quick reminder, feel free to pop comments in the comment section and we can pull them on the screen and you can be part of the conversation today as we turn the page and turn our attention to previewing the Week 4 matchup against the Cleveland Browns. I am AJ Mansour. He's Jack Day. And today we actually have a special guest. We're going to bring him into the fold real quick here. His name is Ellis Williams. He works for Cleveland.com and he's going to give us an inside perspective on the Cleveland Browns. Ellis, welcome to the conversation.
What's up, AJ? What's up, Jack? How y'all doing?
Doing pretty good. Now, you guys got to fill in the gap here real quick. Ellis, I looked at your Twitter bio. I see you have some ties to Minnesota. I know you and Jack go back a little bit. Let me know real quick. What's the relationship between you and Jack? And what's your ties to Minnesota?
Yeah, man. Hastings, Minnesota, born and bred from the same hometown as Jack. Grew up cheering for these Vikings. You never really escape them on Sundays, despite my career taking me elsewhere, whether it's in some family group chats or with hometown friends, fantasy football leagues. It's Vikings all the time. So though I cover the Browns, I'm really always up on what's going on with the Vikings, and it's been a blast following you guys and Jack's career specifically, as you guys have carved out a name for yourselves out here, and you guys do great work. So it's an honor to come on.
Well, thank you very much, man. Appreciate the kind words. It's been fun kind of checking in on what you're doing with Cleveland.com and covering the Browns as well. Jack, I'm going to let you start it off here, obviously. Lots of questions on these Cleveland Browns, a team that we don't usually see here in Minnesota. Kick it off. Let's get the insight from Ellis.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things and biggest storylines going in this game is I think something that, if I'm remembering correctly, you joined Andrew Kramer on a podcast last year, 2 years ago, kind of when this was all kind of going down. But when Kevin Stefanski left Minnesota and now is the head coach of the Cleveland Browns, I think that left kind of the state of Minnesota was torn on that, because it seems like 50% of the fan base is all behind Mike Zimmer, but the other 50% wanted to keep Kevin Stefanski here. So that's kind of one storyline that I'm looking forward to watching, is Mike Zimmer and kind of this rebuilt, I put air quotes around rebuilt because the defense hasn't looked exactly quite like what we were expecting, against Kevin Stefanski. And I think both offenses are very similar minded. They both want to play more smash mouth football. Nick Chubb, Dalvin Cook are both top 5, top 6 running backs in the league. So I just wanted to get your takes on, like, what do you expect this game to be between Kevin Stefanski and Mike Zimmer, with that kind of being one of the biggest headlines kind of surrounding this game?
Yeah, well, at first I think there's going to be just a lot of emotion involved in this one, right? I mean, for Kevin Stefanski to spend 14 years inside that Vikings organization and get what I've heard people call his football doctrine inside that building, working as first the assistant to Brad Childress, and then through assistant to the quarterback coach, running back coach, tight end coach, QB coach on his own, offensive coordinator. He coached every position other than the offensive line through those 14 years, working with coordinators, Norv Turner, Bill Musgrave, Gary Kubiak, missing one in there, Pat Shurmur. So Kevin has really immersed himself in the language of football, and likely was the heir apparent to Mike Zimmer if that 2019 season didn't go well. And even Zimmer blocking him from going to the New York Giants with Coach Shurmur, you see a value that Kevin had within that building. And then, of course, when it was time for him to go, it was time for him to go. And that then brings us to this game where I see an offense very similar to what the Vikings run, but now Kevin Stefanski has put his own touches on it. You see more two tight end vertical passing game than I think you saw in Minnesota. You see a more diverse run game. It's far more than just wide zone. You see duo, you see power schemes, you see two back power. They're not afraid to pitch it and pin and pull and crack back and wham block and all that good stuff that you get from what is a Bill Callahan offensive line coach and his run scheme and run game coordinator there. So it's an offense that's grown since he's come from Minnesota, but still has a lot of the Gary Kubiak bones and structures, if you will. And when you look at Mike Zimmer, you got to think that Kevin knows how to attack this defense. One of the best quotes I've stumbled upon when I was learning about Kevin's upbringing inside that Vikings building was that when it was finally his time to start calling plays, Harrison Smith, probably early in the year, week 3 or week 4, something like that, came over to Kevin and told him that, hey, this stuff's really difficult to defend. And for Kevin, that was a quiet feather in the cap where, all right, I am doing this right and I am doing this well. And you're seeing what Kevin loves to call a marriage between the run and the pass. You don't want your runs to look like runs, and you don't want your passes to be obvious passing. You want your run plays to look like it could be a pass, and a pass play, of course, being a run, and that's just called play action. So you're going to see a lot of play action. Baker Mayfield's been tearing it up with that. You're going to see Baker take off at times. He's been very deliberate in his ability to get out in timely situations. And then you're going to see deep strikes. This team's going to throw the ball downfield, and challenge these Minnesota defensive backs, which I'm sure you two have something to say about. Odell Beckham Jr. is back. They've got a rookie named Anthony Schwartz who runs 4.26 speed. And then in between, they've got tight ends that are going to eat up the middle. And I haven't even gotten to Nick Chubb or Kareem Hunt. That's a 1-2 punch that is the best in football. So there's a lot of options. It's just really going to come down to how Kevin Stefanski calls the game, and then a defense keeping up with what is clearly an underrated Vikings offense, at least nationally.
Yeah, as we throw some love onto the screen for the Hastings boys in the chat here today.
That's what's up.
Hey, Ellis, last year was kind of a weird year, obviously, with COVID and everything shut down there. Tell us what Kevin Stefanski is like as a person, as you cover him as a head coach. We saw 1 year of him get in front of the podium, really, as he was the offensive coordinator. But what is it like covering him and seeing his leadership kind of grow over the last couple of years? It's
boring. No, I'm just kidding. He really honestly has already been nicknamed Baby Belichick with the type of answers he gives the media. You get him behind closed doors, and you get a football talker, a guy who will draw things up, and someone who understands the language of the game like anyone. He's a savant in that way. He's unflappable. You're not going to see his pulse rise or sink. He's cool for every moment. In my reporting that I did on a story I just had come out with that really focused on the building of Kevin Stefanski over those 14 years, I learned about his sense of humor, his ability to keep things light, but he is always about his business. He's about the work. He's not giving this team rah-rah speeches. And even now with COVID and us being out of the locker room, the little videos we are able to see inside there, this isn't a rah-rah type of guy. He doesn't play off the emotion of it. He is emotional person to person, player to coach when he needs to be. But this is a team that does their work Monday through Thursday and then lets that product speak for itself come game day. So they're going to be prepared. They're going to be ready. And to me, that is the difference between what a lot of these offenses around the league look like, more of a read and react type thing, Kyler Murray, Lamar Jackson, compared to what a Browns offense has to be, which has to be timely, precise, and accurate. And that's exactly what Kevin Stefanski has built offensively and really through the whole Browns organization. I mean, we're talking about the Cleveland Browns here, right? A team that was 1-31 before Kevin got there, a laughing stock of the league. And now in just one quick season, he's the NFL Coach of the Year, ends a 26-year playoff drought, and now has them as a Super Bowl favorite. It's a remarkable turnaround.
Yeah, and I wanted to go back to something that you brought up before this, because I think the Vikings are averaging, their defense is giving up like 119.3 yards, rushing yards per game. And it's going to be difficult to stop Kareem Hunt and Nick Chubb. Kareem Hunt is coming off of a monster day last Sunday. But I wanted to go back to something, and this was something that I saw all over your Twitter throughout training camp. Was it looked like and sounded like Odell Beckham Jr. was kind of balling out throughout training camp, and took in one league. I did take some of your fantasy advice to pick him up, so that was just in one league, not my biggest one, but I do have him on one league. What has it been like for him? I know he didn't play the first 2 weeks with that injury. Was that more precautionary, and are you ready to see? Is this going to be like, I know they were talking about before Chicago, like a potential pitch count. I don't know if that happened or not, but is Odell Beckham Jr. like ready to go fully? And then on top of that, are you looking forward to that LSU storyline? Because I know it seems like anywhere you go in the NFL these days, there's a LSU storyline, especially when it follows the Minnesota Vikings or the Browns with Odell Beckham Jr.
Yeah, there's SEC, LSU storylines all over the place. Odell today was asked about Justin Jefferson and just raved about the young man. How could you not? I'm sure their embrace before and after the game will be fun. If Odell scores, he's going to break that gritty out. You can just book that. I don't know if you can find any odds on that anywhere, but man, pound that because that'll happen. As for the Odell situation, specifically as it relates to Cleveland, there was some surprise when he didn't go in week 1 in Kansas City. But then when you do some more digging, you realize that it was always the plan to have him be right around the 11th month mark from his ACL injury, which happened, I believe, week 7 in Cincinnati. And that put him right in line for week 3 with the Bears. And then as for a pitch count, so that is something we all suspected happening. And then it didn't come to fruition. It ended up being Odell really controlling his own timing out there and trusting his own body. And the Browns really, when you look at the snaps, Odell played, I believe, 52 of 81 snaps, and that's good for like 64%. But if you saw his snap count through the first 3 quarters, I bet it would have been upwards more of 72, 75-ish, maybe closer to 80, honestly. Meaning he was extremely involved in this game plan. They got him a reverse early, 3 early targets in the first quarter. And as the Bears offense withered away and did absolutely nothing, you were able to see Odell, take most of the fourth quarter off. So considering the controlled environments at our U.S. Bank, I don't expect any sort of pitch count on Odell Beckham Jr. I expect a heavy workload for Odell. He had 50% of the Browns' deep shared target yards in week 3. Expect that to continue. When they go deep, it's going to be for Odell, and he's still an expert at carving up the middle and that one-step slant. And this is, if anything, I expect this to be Odell's best game, considering he shook the rust off last week, and now he's playing in a controlled environment in US Bank.
Yeah, and that's
you're being nice. You're not saying that the Viking secondary has been trash. Which
I'm saving that for you guys. That's your hit.
These two teams have very similar characteristics, especially on offense. They are run-first offenses that will get you into that groove. You mentioned the play action that Baker Mayfield has been executing. That's something that Minnesota hasn't quite gotten up to speed with this year, but we've seen it in the past from Kirk Cousins. Is that really how you shape this offense, and how that offense is dangerous? There is they'll have the threat of Nick Chubb, Kareem Hunt up front, and then they're going to do a play action or just an over-the-top pass when you fall asleep.
So that's the nuts and bolts of this offense, the bones of it, if you will. But honestly, it goes deeper than that in terms of pace of play, game style. What this Browns offense and what this team really needs to do to win is grab a lead early and then rush Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt in the second half, specifically in the fourth quarter. So it wouldn't surprise me if you see the Browns come out throwing in the first and second quarter. It wouldn't surprise me if you see them going for it on fourth down in the first quarter, inside the Vikings 35 and in. They did that twice last week against the Bears and were denied on downs both times. I'm not saying it's the right call every time or that they're going to execute it perfectly, but it is obvious that Kevin Stefanski is willing to be the aggressor because he knows that the real strength of this team is nursing a lead, milking a clock, and letting Nick Chubb work that. The average probably went down last week, but he's 7-8 yards per carry in the fourth quarter, and that's down from his 10 yard per carry average in the fourth quarter a year ago. There's some few games to reference for this. Last year in Tennessee, the Browns jumped out to I think like a 28-3 first half lead versus the Chiefs. They led for 3.5 quarters. This team as a whole, I think, is led for 9.5 of the 12 quarters it's played. So to me, the recipe is pretty simple. They're going to try and jump on the Vikings early and run late, but this Vikings offense isn't Chicago, and that's where I think this might be the first time that the Browns are in a back and forth style game, which is going to put more pressure on Baker Mayfield's shoulders rather than the two-headed monster that's Kareem Hunt and Nick Chubb.
Yeah, speaking of Baker Mayfield, we can kind of get into that now because I know you and I have kind of exchanged some words about Kirk Cousins and Baker Mayfield kind of having a similar play style, but Baker Mayfield kind of having a little bit more of an edge to his game. I was looking at some of his stats yesterday, and I was surprised to see that he was actually right behind Kirk. I think Kirk has a 73.9 completion percentage, and Baker Mayfield is 73.8 completion percentage. So that was surprising to me because coming out of college, it always seemed like I thought he had the accurate arm, and he has the arm strength. He has all the tools that you need. And I think not only is Kevin Stefanski a big part of turning Cleveland around, I think Baker Mayfield, it's no accident that he's the quarterback while everything's being turned around. But talk to me a little bit about that edge that he plays with, because I thought that I would see more than 2 interceptions out of Baker Mayfield because he has that gunslinger mentality. Talk to me about how his game style has kind of changed and how he's played this year. Is that kind of an effect of the play action that Kevin Stefanski brought into the system, or is he just playing better football than he has in years past?
I'll tell you exactly what it is. It's Kevin Stefanski always having a safe outlet for his quarterback and allowing simple reads. So you're going to notice on Sunday loads of pre-snap motion. You're going to see the tight end go in motion, then you're going to see the wide receiver come across the formation, then you're going to see him stop, shimmy back across the formation, and then sprint back the other way. You're going to see a tight ends exchange and mirror. They do so much before the play even happens to decode and give Baker Mayfield information that by the time the ball snapped, Baker knows where to go with it. And that's not calling him a first read quarterback. It's just often his first read is available. And then as you've seen him, I'd say the last 10 weeks of this season last year and through these first 3 weeks, you see him getting off to his second read, and if that's not there, running and taking off. He's much more deliberate and processing more quickly than he was before Kevin Stefanski got here. So there is plenty to say about, look, the Browns have a loaded offensive line. Their left tackle is hurt, which I think is going to be a big issue in this game. But they've got one of the best offensive lines in football, so they protect him. You can lean on the run game. But it really is a testament to Baker's work ethic, his intelligence to, I would say, master a Kevin Stefanski offense in 1 year. And now they're at the point where they're talking slang. Baker's being able to make more calls himself. They milk that play clock down to the last 2 or 3 seconds, and they go. So I think the reads are simpler because of what Kevin's doing pre-snap. And then Baker is just making good decisions. And it's odd. Well, I shouldn't say odd. It's honestly not surprising. But when I'm in Cleveland or I go on radio in Cleveland and I tell people that I think Baker's comp is Kirk Cousins and that's not a bad thing, oh, they get so sad, you guys. They get so sad, and it's like, what? I mean, Kirk is out here outperforming Kyler Murray and Russell Wilson these past 2 weeks, and I know what the up and down roller coaster ride is like with Kirk Cousins, but Baker is a guy who needs everything around him to be above average to good, if not great. You got to have a nice game plan for him, and then you got to let his mind do a lot of the work because the arm talent is as well as anyone in the league. And Baker probably has a little stronger arm than Kirk, but the accuracy is very similar. And these two quarterbacks play similarly, aside from the fact that Baker's a swag monster. Kirk Cousins just came out saying he's swaggerless, which is his swagger. And I don't think Kirk Cousins is running around on any progressive commercials or anything like that. But other than that, on the field, I think they're pretty comparable.
Well, if Dockers ever needed a sponsorship, I think Kirk Cousins is the guy that they need right there.
That's good stuff.
Ellis, we've talked for about 20 minutes so far, and we haven't mentioned the defense yet of Cleveland. Last week, the defense had sacks up and down the field. Was that more an equation that the equality is that the Cleveland Browns defense is that good, or the Chicago Bears are just that bad?
I always said when I would come on, if I ever came on a show on KFAN, I wouldn't say or respond with a little bit of both, because that's such a cop out. But I do have to say it's a little bit of both. I'll lean towards the Browns' talent, but first I want to shame the Bears for that atrocious game plan. They left Justin Fields no outlets to get rid of the football, no real quick game for him to be had. If his first read wasn't there, it was panic, and that's what was disappointing for that Chicago game plan. But the Browns are built up front to terrorize quarterbacks. We're talking Myles Garrett, Jadeveon Clowney, a young man named Tack McKinley who's getting a second chance and really making things happen. Malik Jackson, who's a veteran who still has plenty of gas. And they've got some other third, fourth round picks, Jordan Elliott. They rotate, they platoon guys, but the monsters, their heavy horses are Garrett and Clowney. Garrett had a career high 4.5 sacks on Sunday. He's chasing that elusive Defensive Player of the Year award. Adding 2 more in Minnesota would get him right on track for that. And that's a guy who can really wreck a game. He's obviously the Browns' best player. And to me, that is where this game ultimately becomes won or lost. If Myles Garrett starts disrupting, finding strip sacks, then it's going to swing the game. But if you can neutralize Myles like teams did in week 1 and week 2, then this becomes a much more back and forth game, and you're going to see the secondary and the auxiliary parts start to take over.
Yeah, I'm excited to watch that aspect because the Vikings actually traveled into Arizona after Chandler Jones had his 5-sack performance. And I was kind of looking at it, and I think Myles Garrett, you might have said this already, 5.5 sacks on the year. Danielle Hunter is coming off of a season where he didn't play, and he's at 4 sacks. So I think those two players are just two players, again, like Kirk and Baker. Those two, they're freak athletes that are just like, they're built to play defensive end in the NFL. Like, you just look at those guys and you're like, they are monsters. And I think that's kind of the key for both teams. Is if Danielle Hunter can have a day and get after Baker Mayfield, I think that will disrupt what Kevin Stefanski is trying to do, and vice versa. The Vikings offensive line has been a talking point, as you're aware of, for several seasons, probably since Kirk Cousins arrived here. And now it's starting to, and I don't want to say this because the moment we kind of talked the special teams unit up was the next week. Greg Joseph missed that 37-yard field goal. But the Vikings offensive line is slowly creeping towards being at least a mediocre offensive line. I think PFF has them graded out as the 4th most efficient offensive line in terms of passing or pass blocking. So I saw that stat and I was mind blown by that because that's something that I'm just not used to seeing. People in Minnesota are not used to seeing. But I think this is going to be that first like real true test with Myles Garrett. I can't speak too much. You can kind of fill me in on this with Jadeveon Clowney, if he has been the good Jadeveon Clowney, if he's kind of been on the other side of the spectrum, where I know he's kind of had some ups and downs throughout his career. But I'm really excited to kind of focus in on that matchup because this offensive line is starting to show some promise. Christian Darrisaw is starting to have his first week of full practices. I don't know if this is necessarily the game you throw him out there for his first career start, but how are you expecting the game to kind of go? Are you expecting it to be more of a day for Myles Garrett, or could you see Danielle Hunter having his way with Cleveland's offensive line?
Jack, you set that up perfectly. I've been very impressed with the Vikings offensive line, and before the year, I was like, nah, this is a wrap. This unit is a mess all over again for the 3rd or 4th year in a row, despite all the resources they plug into that area. They just can't figure it out. And then you see them play Arizona tough, and that's Chandler Jones and JJ Watt over there. So I'm going to say this is an advantage Danielle Hunter game. I am worried about the Browns offensive line, and it's for one reason. It's left tackle. Their sophomore, Jedrick Wills, the 10th pick from a year ago, has been battling an ankle injury. He's been trying to tough it out, but he had to get pulled out of the past 2 games after just not being able to go. His lateral quickness is not there. He's getting beat on the outside. They can't run screen game to his side because he's just in no man's land out there, not being able to move. And that means that the Browns are playing either a 3rd-string tackle in a young man named Blake Hentz or a journeyman swing tackle in Chris Hubbard, who is serviceable but is not going to be able to compete with Danielle Hunter. So unless the Browns are keeping a back in, keeping a tight end in, which is something Kevin Stefanski doesn't like doing, I think the Vikings defensive line, specifically Danielle Hunter, Everson Griffin's been coming on nice late. They might be able to get back there and frustrate Baker Mayfield, and this Browns team might have to be playing from behind for the first time all year.
We're going to ask you to be analytical here and pick some holes in that Browns team. If the Vikings have success, whether they jump out to a lead or whether they win this game, what do the Browns struggle with, whether it is the on the defensive side or the offensive side? How do the Vikings get to the Browns in this game?
I hope not many Browns fans are listening to this because there's a few ways. All right. I just laid out the situation up front at left tackle. That concerns me. Also, the Browns rookie cornerback, Greg Newsome, who's been playing excellent. I think he's only allowed 3 receptions over his first 3 games. He's out with a calf injury. That means 3rd-year guy, Jedrick Wills, is making his first start since his rookie year. Greedy missed all last year with a shoulder injury. And that concerns me when you're looking at a guy like Justin Jefferson and Adam Thielen, even KJ Osborne, and Kirk Cousins playing the way he is. This is a secondary, and teams have been trying Denzel Ward. I mean, Denzel Ward allowed, I think, 9 receptions to Tyreek Hill. Brandon Cooks had him for about 6 grabs for 70 yards and a score. And we're talking now again about Justin Jefferson and Adam Thielen. So I think the corners have a lot to prove in this game. I mentioned left tackle, and then the way to move the ball on this Browns defense has been methodical. Take those 4 yards, 6 yard plays, and Kirk Cousins is more than capable of doing that. The linebackers can be slow at times, aside from JOK, Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah. They have had injuries there. They've been playing a veteran named Malcolm Smith, the former Super Bowl MVP Malcolm Smith, but those days are long behind him. And they're vulnerable in those intermediate areas. So if basically what I'm saying is if the pass rush doesn't get home, this secondary has issues. And with the way the Vikings offensive line's been playing, I think Kirk Cousins is going to have his pickings out there, which again, I think is going to trend towards the Browns playing catch up in this one.
Yeah. And you kind of talked about Newsome, and that was a talking point just because I think I love watching Vikings football, but I think one of my favorite times of the year is the NFL draft. And you bring up Greg Newsome. I thought, and this is just mainly after the first two rounds, not even the first 2 days. The first 2 rounds, I thought the Browns had the best draft in the entire NFL with Newsome. And then, like you said, JOK. Can you speak a little bit more? I know you just talked about Newsome. Can you talk about JOK more? And is he kind of claim that starting linebacker role for Cleveland, or what is his role and how has he been playing?
When he's out there, he's playing great. He plays really well when he's out there. He hasn't solidified any sort of starting role. Even if when he starts, it's more of a role-playing thing. He'll get anywhere between 20 and 27 snaps. The coaching staff's been vocal about not giving any rookie too much of a workload. And specifically, JOK is a guy that you can play at middle, you can play at weak. The Browns prefer to play a 4-2-5 scheme to have a big dime out there, play 3 safeties. So it takes a linebacker off the field. And JOK is the guy out there for that often, but they have guys that they trust more situationally than JOK. And JOK is the type of player right now that would do great in a game plan against a Kyler Murray or a Lamar Jackson when you let the athlete just go out there, read and react and compete. Against a Kirk Cousins cerebral type of quick game and needing to hit your drops, needing to have your proper alignment in your right spots, this probably won't be the best spot for JOK. He's going to be out there. You got to figure it out eventually, but this Browns draft will be more valuable, more dominant towards their game plan next year as you get into a sophomore season for them than it's going to be right now, just because there's so much to ask for a linebacker like that when you only have 2 out there and you're playing against teams like the Vikings that are so versatile, are so multiple, and are veteran-led.
Ellis Williams, is a NFL beat writer and Cleveland Browns beat writer for Cleveland.com. Jack, unless you have any final words for your man here, we're going to let him go. Ellis, are you coming to Minnesota this weekend?
I'll be up there in the press box, my man. I'm really looking forward to it. I've covered a boys soccer state championship at US Bank, but never an NFL football game. So here we go.
Oh, there you go. I know Jack will be there this weekend. I'll be there, so we'll have to say hey in person. And hopefully your favorite football team can get a win. I'll leave that ambiguous, and we'll leave it there. But Ellis, thanks for joining us, my man.
You guys rock, Jack. I'm so glad we were able to do this. Let's go H-Town.
Appreciate it, man.
All right, we're going to tie a bow on this podcast. We'll be back right after the game from the stadium for an initial reaction podcast of the State of Purple podcast. Again, special thanks to Ellis Williams. You can follow him on Twitter, by the way, at Book of Ellis, and get all the scoop on the Cleveland Browns and follow his perspective of the game this weekend. We'll talk to you later.
10 seconds to go. We need a Minneapolis miracle. Case on a deep drop. Steps up in the pocket. He'll fire to the right side. Off by Diggs.